How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. We're studying Daf Lamed Hey, Daf 35 of Masechta Zevachim. Friends, well, I have some good news for you, which is we did already, I think, more than half of the first Amud of the Daf. So that's good. Yesterday was a long Daf. I mean, I feel like half the Dafs these days are long Dafs. Insane. But anyways, we managed to get up to the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph. So hopefully that means that Daf Lamed Hey will get a little bit of a break. It'll be a little bit shorter, but I guess we'll have to see. So as I mentioned, we're going to start with the Mishnah, more halachos of pigul. Another Mishnah, more details around pigul, and then we jump into the Gemara, Pigguled Fetuses. How is that? Pigguled Fetuses. We're going to see how that works. It's a little tricky. And female korbin olahs. Normally a korbin olah is a zocher, is male. What if it is female? What happens? Friends, that's what's up. And Daf Lamed Hey of Masechta Zevachim. Here we go. Friends, we are going to begin on Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph. As I said, about halfway through the Amud at the Mishnah. Shoichet is a zevach lechol, dover she'ein darko lechol, la'aktu dover she'ein darko la'aktu, kosher Rabbi Eliezer, posel chever. If this sounds familiar, it's because it is. I think this is already the third time that we're seeing it. Let's see. Daf Chof Ches, Daf Lamed Aleph. Yeah, it looks like might be the third time that we are already seeing this Mishnah. 1 second, let me make sure my volume is off. Okay, great. One second, let me also make sure that this thing is on Do Not Disturb. Great. All right, now I can be all focused. So, so pigul, of course, right? So a person slaughters a korbin, and he has in mind lechol davar she'ein darko lechol. So we've been assuming, let's say, for example, a murin, right? Things that are normally burnt on the mizbeach. He has in mind that he's going to eat those tomorrow. Chutz lizmanu. Or, for example, the meat is meant to be eaten. But this person has in mind, I'm going to burn that meat tomorrow. Kosher. So the Tanna Kama says kosher. Because these are things that are not normally, right? You're thinking about eating something that isn't normally eating, burning something that isn't normally burning. Rabbi Eliezer posel. Rabbi Eliezer, however, says posel. Okay. Now, if a person slaughters a korbin with the intention of eating something that is normally eaten, to burn something that is normally burnt, right? That's the correct things that is thinking about, to eat something that's normally eaten, to burn something that's normally burnt. Chutz lizmano, but pachos mikazayis. But the intention was only to eat or to burn less than a shiur, right? Less than a kazayis, kosher. The korbin is kosher because it was an insufficient shiur. Lecho kachatzizayis, la'aktu kachatzizayis. As we've seen, I thought maybe the Gemara was going to talk about, like, why did it repeat this verbatim, but it didn't. But lecho kachatzizayis, la'aktu kachatzizayis, kosher she'nechil v'aktor mitzdarfen. As we know, if the kavana is to eat half a zayis chutz lizmano and to burn half a zayis chutz lizmano, those will not join together. They're incompatible because eating and burning are incompatible, and there's no shear, and therefore the korbin will be kosher. Hashoichet es hazevach. A person slaughters a korbin. Lechol kazayis, to eat a kazayis min ha'or, of the hide. Min ha'rotev, or from some kind of gravy. I think it's like if you cook the korbin, and then there's that gravy, and you want to eat that gravy, I guess, chutz lizmanu. Uminakife, or from whatever, like, stuff sticks to the bottom of the pot kind of stuff. Umina olo is some kind of tendon or something in the neck. Sounds exciting. I think it's does Rashi say it's generally hard in animals? Rashi says It's a hard sinew in the neck that is not eaten. Or the person has intention to eat from the bones, or from the sinews, or the horns or the hooves, outside of the proper time or outside the proper place, kosher. The korbin is kosher because these are things that are not normally eaten. And you won't be chayiv for pigul. So, for example, if let's say a person slaughters a korbin with the intention of eating the meat, chutz lizmano, the classic pigul. And in the case of classic pigul, if one eats the korbin, so then you can be chayiv kares, right? So if a person slaughters a korbin with the intention of eating it chutz lizmano, and then they do zrikas adam, right, and everything is done, is properly piggled. Well, if that person then eats a I believe a kazayis of the korbin, so then it's a chiyuv kares. But what if a person eats the hooves, or one of these things that were listed? Ein chayav nalem mishum pigul. They won't be chayav kares for pigul. V'noser. Also, if understandably the hooves were not eaten, then this person eats the hooves the next day or whatever. So then v'tamei. Or if he's tamei and eats the hooves or the olol or whatever these things were, the hide, right? So ein chayav nalem mishum pigul v'noser v'tamei. You will be potter for those three situations. A person so mukdashin, Rashi points out that when it says mukdashin, it refers to a female animal. It refers to a female animal. Right? Rashi says es hamukdashin kolecha denoked lishna mari b'nekevis. When it's talking about mukdashin, it's talking about nekevis. Lechol shalil oshilya. So again, I'm sorry. So ashoichet is amukdashin, somebody who slaughters a female animal, lechol shalil, with the intention of eating its fetus, oshilya, or afterbirth, bachutz, outside of the chutz limkomo. I think alternatively, you can also read it like or chutz lizmano or whatever. Lo pigel. It's not going to be pigul, right? If the intention was about the fetus, right? This is right. I marked here as the second section of today's daf, Pigguled Fetuses. We're going to be learning about this. Hamolek. So we said lo pigul. It's not going to be pigul when we're talking about the intention was to eat the fetus chutz lizmano or chutz limkomo. Hamolek es atorin, a person who does if a kohen does malika on a turtle dove. Lechol beitzein bachutz, and the intention was, so malika is like the way that you kill a bird in the Beis Hamikdash with using a fingernail, and the intention at the time of the malika was to eat the eggs bachutz, right? Chutz limkomo. Lo pigel, it's not pigul. Chalev mukdashin, milk of a female korbin. So a person slaughters a female korbin with the intention of drinking its milk. Chutz lizmanu, chutz limkomu, uveitze torin, or to eat the eggs of a turtle dove. Ein chayav nalen mishum pigul v'noser v'tamei. You will not be chayav for pigul, right? So if you have a korbin that's actually pigul and then you drink the milk or eat the eggs, or if these things are left over, or if you eat them in a state of tumah, so in those cases you will be not chayav. In those cases, you will be not chayiv. You will not be chayiv in those cases. And now moving on to the next section of today's daf, Pigguled Fetuses. This is really going to take us really kind of almost to the end, till the final chunk. So we're going to focus on the shita of Rebbe Elazar. It's a little bit technical, but I think it's manageable. The good thing is we're already basically at the bottom of Lamed Hey Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara, Amar Rebbe Elazar, says Rebbe Elazar, Pigguled Zevach nispagal ashalil, b'shalil lo nispagal zevach. Piggul ba'ol. Okay. In our Mishnah, we had mentioned the fetus. What did we say? We said I'm reading from the Mishnah. It's not pigul. right? So we said in our Mishnah that if a person slaughters a female animal with the intention of eating the fetus, chutz lizmanu, let's say, so then it's not going to be pigul. So now, says Rabbi Elazar is shtikul chiddush. He says that pigel bezevach nispagel hashalul. B'shalul lo nispagel hazevach. So let's focus on the second part of that phrase first. B'shalul lo nispagel hazevach. That as our Mishnah said, that if a person slaughters a female korbin with the intention of eating the fetus chutz lizmanu, it's not pigul, right? Again, the second part of that phrase, b'shalul lo nispagel hazevach. If a person has intention to eat the fetus chutz lizmanu, the korbin itself, it's not going to create pigul. It's not going to create pigul. However, the first part of that phrase is interesting, which is that pigel bezevach nispagel hashalul, which is interesting. According to Rabbi Elazar, however, if we're talking about an actual case of pigul, so let's say you have this korbin and a person slaughtered the korbin with the intention of eating its meat, chutz lizmano, and now it's actually pigul, well then, if you eat the fetus, you will be chayiv kares. Because while intention about the fetus will not create pigul, but once there already is pigul, it will apply to the fetus as well. And if you eat it, because I said the fetus, you'll be chayiv kares. So again, now, so we're going to have three scenarios like this. Rabbi Elazar is going to list three similar scenarios. So again, Rabbi Elazar says, pigel bezevach nispagel hashalul. If we're talking about a korbin that is pigul, well then the fetus will also be pigul. If you eat a kazayis, you'll be chayiv kares. B'shalul lo nispagel hazevach. But if the intention was to eat the fetus chutz lizmano, that won't create a piguled korbin. Pigel be'olol nispaglo mura. So this is talking about a bird. So in our Mishnah, when we talked about the olahs, this sinew of sorts in the neck that is very hard and inedible, that was by an animal. But in a bird, it's softer and it's edible. So pigel be'olahs, so if a person creates a situation of pigul by a bird by intending to eat the olahs chutz lizmanu, nispagla mura, what's the mura again? The crop, I think it's called. Go look it up. I didn't. Someone to do some part of the digestive system. Nispagla mura. So the crop also becomes pigul. But b'mura lo nispagel olol. But if the intention was to eat the crop chutz lizmano, the rest of the bird, including the olol, will not be pigul. Pigul be'emurin nispaglu parim. This is talking about parim anisrafim. So for example, if we throw back to Horius, right? For example, par koin Mashiach. This is a cow that is, the blood is thrown by inside the heichel, and the emurin are going to be burnt on the mizbach ha'olah, and the rest of the meat, all of the meat of the cow, is to be taken to the Beis Hadeshin and burnt there. I think it's even outside of the Beis Hamikdash, and burnt there in the Beis Hadeshin. So nobody eats it's a parim anisrafim, right? It's a burnt offering. Nobody's going to be eating it. So now, pigel be'emurin. So if by a parim anisrafim, the cow is slaughtered with the intention of burning the emurim chutz lizmanon, well then the korbin is pigul. Nispaglu parim, and even the meat also is going to be pigul. And if you eat a kazayis of the meat, you will be chayiv kares. However, b'parim, if you slaughter, for example, a par koin Mashiach with the intention of eating the meat, which is not, you're not supposed to eat the meat at all, but you have intention to eat the meat chutz lizmano, lo nispaglu emurim, then we're not going to have pigul. Lema misayele. So 1 second. So reflecting back on Rabbi Elazar. So Rabbi Elazar has an interesting chiddush, which I think is not necessarily in line with our Mishnah, but Rabbi Elazar has an interesting chiddush where you can have these parts of the animal that if you think about eating them chutz lizmano will not create pigul, but once the animal's already pigul, they will also be pigul. And if you eat them chutz lizmano, you're going to be, if you eat them, so then even if it's within the time, but pigul is just a machshava, right? If you have machshava of chutz lizmano, even though you did everything in practice, but right, just to back up for a second, right, just refresh on pigul is all in your mind, right? So if you slaughter a korbin with the intention of doing zrikas adam tomorrow, but you actually do Zrikas Adam today. You do everything at the end of the day kosher. It doesn't matter, right? Because you had in mind to do Zrikas Adam tomorrow, so therefore it's going to be pigul. And if you eat Ekazai of that, even today, within the time frame that you're supposed to eat it, it's still, you're going to be chayiv kares because of that machshava that you had. Okay. Fine. Let's say that the following supports Rabbi Elazar. So this relates to a machlokas between Reb Shimon and the Chacham, which we've seen before. Have we even seen this in Horius? Where did we see this? Does it say Horius? I don't know. We've seen this before, that Be'etzem, Reb Shimon says that there can only be pigul by a korbin whose blood is thrown on the mizbech chitzon. But by parim anisrofim, for example, where the blood is in the heichal, Reb Shimon would say that there's no pigul. Pigul doesn't apply to parim anisrofim. The Chacham would say pigul does apply to parim anisrofim. Now, v'shavim, but they agree, she'im chishev ba'achilas parim u'v'srei fason lo asav lo klum. However, even the Chacham who say that there is pigul conceptually by parim anisrofim. However, it depends how you're going to make it pigul. If you slaughter the parim anisrofim with the intention of burning the emurim chutz lizmanon, okay, that'll create pigul. But as we said, that they agree shem chisha b'achilas parim, that if you slaughter the cow with the intention of eating its meat, which is not supposed to be eaten, it's supposed to be burnt in the Beis Hadeshin entirely. That's why it's called parim anisrofim. But you slaughter the cow with the intention of eating its meat, chutz lizmano, that is not going to be pigul. Alternatively, to burn chutz lizmano will not be pigul, because, remember, im he ochel ye ochel, said the pasuk, achilas adam and achilas mizbeach, not achilas Beis Hadeshin. Right, so because the parim anisrofim are burnt in the Beis Hadeshin, so if you have intention to burn it chutz lizmano, it's not going to be pigul, because it's not achilas mizbeach. It's not burnt on the mizbeach. Okay, so they both agree. So both the Chacham and Reb Shimon agree that if a parim anisrofim is slaughtered with the intention of either eating the meat chutz lizmano or burning in the Beis Hadeshin chutz lizmano, it will not be pigul. My love. Okay, we want to say, what's the implication though? Hachishe be'emurim, but if the parim anisrofim was slaughtered with the intention of burning the emurim on the mizbeach, right? Because by parim anisrofim there is still the emurim that are going to be burnt on the mizbeach, and then the rest of it is burnt by the Beis Hadeshin. If the intention was to burn the emurim that are burnt on the mizbeach chutz lizmanan, well then nispaglu parim, we want to say that the implication is that if the intention was about the emurim, well then nispaglu parim. Well then the meat becomes pigul. Right? So we want to say that if you slaughter the parim anisrofim with the intention of eating the meat of the parim anisrofim chutz lizmanon, that will not make pigul. But we want to imply, but if you slaughter the parim anisrofim with the intention of burning the emurim chutz lizmanon, well then the parim anisrofim, the cow will be pigul, and even if you eat the meat now, you will be chayiv kares. So meaning here, you again, similar concept, that you have something that when you have machshava about it, it won't make pigul, but once the korbin is already pigul, then this kind of comes along, and if you then eat the meat, you will be chayiv kares, right? So again, my lab, achishe be'emurim, if you had kavana by the emurim, to burn them chutz lizmanon, so then it's pagul parim, then even the meat becomes pigul, and if you eat it, the meat of the parim anisrofim, you'll be chayiv kares. Lo, no, that is not the implication. The implication is achishe be'emurin, that if you slaughter a parim anisrofim with the intention of burning the emurim chutz lizmanon, nispaglu emurin atzmon. What becomes pigul? Just the emurim. The emurim themselves become pigul. And I guess if you eat the emurim, So then, I imagine what it's saying is that if you then eat the emurim, I guess, so then you'll be chayiv kares. But this doesn't necessarily imply that the meat of the parim manasofim would be pigul. Tashma coming here. Parim manasofim, v'sir manasofim. Okay, so still on the sugya of parim manasofim, sir manasofim, which I think is a reference to the korbanis, the korbin chatas of Yom Kippur. Me'alin boyen misheuktishu. Okay, so once these animals have been, the person's been makdish this animal, this is going to be a parim manasofim or a sir manasofim. So then, ma'alin boyen misheuktishu. So from that point on, from the time of hektish, of kiddush, from the time you makdish it. So there's a din me'ilah. If you get benefit from it, so then you'll be chayiv to bring a korbin osher me'ilos. Nishchatu. Now, once these korbanis are slaughtered, huchshiru liposel betvul mechusar kippurim uvelina. Well, then, if a tvul yom or mechusar kippurim touches them, so they become tameh. Uvelina. Or if you leave them overnight without burning them, so then they will be puzzled. So my love, linas basar. So let's assume what it means is that the linas basar, meaning if the meat of so again we're talking about parim manasofim and sir manasofim, right? So we said that once they're slaughtered, so then we have to be concerned about lina. I mean, lina means leaving it past the time that you need to burn it. So let's assume that that's talking about the meat. That if the meat is not burnt by the morning, in the Beis Hadeshin, then it will be possible belina. My lab, lina's basar. So let's say it's talking about the meat of the korbin. Vishmamina migo de pasla belina pasla ba machshava. And we want to say that since the meat of the parim manasofim and the sir manasofim, let's just talk about parim manasofim, so we're talking about one thing, that since the meat of the parim manasofim will be pasul belina, so let's also assume that even a machshava of lina would make it pasul. And therefore, okay, that if you slaughter the parim manasofim, let's say, with the intention of leaving it overnight, so then it would be pasul lo linas emurim. No, it's talking about the emurim, i.e., if you slaughter the parim manasofim with the intention of leaving the emurim without burning them. Hamliktani seifa kulan ma'alin boen albeis hadeshin at sheyutach basar. But one second, the seifa, right, the next part of the brisa says that when burning these animals, right, so let's say the parim manasofim, when burning it, so then there could still be a din me'ilah until the meat gets, I guess, burnt or singed. Michlal dereisha linas basar linas basar, right? So therefore, since the seifa is talking about the meat, right, that when it comes to burning the meat, so there could be a din me'ilah until the meat is singed. So therefore, let's say that the ratio is also talking about the meat. That if you have intention of linas basar, if you slaughter the korbin with the intention of leaving it without burning it, it will be possible. We say no, when it comes to pigul or psul, by making the korbin pasul, so if you slaughter the korbin with the intention of leaving the emurim without burning the emurim, it'll be pasul. However, thoughts about leaving the meat without burning won't make it pasul. And then the next part of the brisa talks about burning the meat, and you could still be over on me'ilah until it gets burnt. So that part's talking about the meat. So the first part is talking about a machshava of leaving the emurim. The second part is talking about how you could still be over on me'ilah until the meat is burnt. Mesiv Rabba asks a kasha on Rab Elazar. Ve'elu, he quotes a brayso. Ve'elu she'ein mifaglin ve'ein mispaglin. Oh, okay. The following things are not mifagel and they're not mispagel. Oh, okay. We're going to have to figure out what this means. But they are not mifagel. Mifagel means having a machshava about them will make the korbin pigul. And mispagel means that having a machshava pigul would make these things pigul if you eat them, and you can't eat them. So, let's see. These things don't make pigul, ve'ein mispaglin, and they also don't become the target of pigul. They themselves don't become pigul. Tzemer shebrosh kvasim, the wool on the heads of the sheep. V'seir shebizkan tyoshim, and the goatee of goats. Ve'or, and hide, ve'arotev, and gravies, ve'akipe, and the stuff at the bottom of the pod, ve'olo, and that tough, like sinew in the neck. Ve'amura, and the crop, ve'atzamos, and the bones, ve'agidin, and the sinews, ve'akronayim, and ve'atzlafayim, and the horns and the hooves, ve'asholav, ve'ashilya, the fetus and the afterbirth, v'chalev amukdashin, and the milk of female animals of etzitorin, and eggs of turtle doves. Okay, all of those so far, I believe, were in our Mishnah. Now, the Brisa repeats, Kulan lo mifaglin v'lo mispaglin. They are not mifagel, and they are not mispagel. Ve'ein chayav and olav mishum pigul, and you're also not chayav for pigul. Okay. No servitame or no servitame, like we explained earlier. Okay, and if you burn them outside of the Azara, potter. My love. Okay, now here it says the Gemara, lo mifaglin hazevach. Okay, they don't make the zevach pigos. Like for example, the fetus. If you slaughter a korbin with the intention of eating the fetus chutz zmano, it won't make the korbin pigul. V'lo mispaglin machmas zevach. And we want to say, what does lo mispaglin mean? It means that, and if you slaughter that korbin with the intention of eating its meat chutz zmano, lo mispaglin, the fetus, for example, won't become pigul. If you eat the fetus, you won't be chayiv kares. Unlike Rabbi Elazar, who says that the fetus you would be chayiv kares for the fetus. It would be mispagel, it would become pigul with the rest of the korbin. Lo mifaglin esazevach. No, what it means is that the fetus, for example, if you slaughter the korbin with the intention of eating the fetus chutz zmano, it won't make the animal pigul. And also, v'lo mispaglin machmas atzman, it won't make itself pigul either, right? So argues Rabbi Elazar, look, if you slaughter the korbin with the intention of eating its meat chutz zmano, well, then the korbin, right, just a regular pigul scenario, the korbin would pigul, and guess what? So will the fetus. Now, if you slaughter the korbin with the intention of eating the fetus chutz lizmano, well then, the korbin will not be pigul, and neither will the fetus itself be pigul. That's what it means, lo mispagel. That when you have an intent, when you slaughter a korbin with the intention of eating the fetus chutz lizmano, it won't make the lo mifagel, it won't make the korbin pigul, v'lo mispagel, nor will it make itself pigul. However, argues Rabbi Elazar, if the animal was slaughtered with the intention of eating its meat chutz lizmano, a general sort of machshava of pigul, well then the korbin will be pigul, and so will the fetus, argues Rabbi Elazar. If that's the case, as I pointed out as we were learning the Brisa repeated V'chulon lo mifaglin v'lo mispaglin. How come it repeated itself? And the Gemara says, I don't know. According to that reasoning, ein chayav no mishum pigul hasulamali. Right after that, it says, and also you're not chayav for pigul, noser and tummy. Why reiterate again after we've already said twice, lo mifaglin, lo mispaglin, and also it's not pigul? That makes time number 3. So Ella, how come it mentioned ein chayav no mishum pigul v'noser v'tamei? Well, I the bar the misna noser v'tamei tana pigul. Well, because we're going to mention that also you're not going to be chayav for noser or tamei, so it also mentioned pigul. Ein chayav no mishum pigul noser v'tamei. It's the trio. So Achanami here also, because we also wanted to add Hamaylamein Bachutz, that if you burn them outside of the Beis Hamikdash, you are going to be outside of the Zohar, you're going to be potter. So Tananami v'chun lo mifaglim. So we also re-mentioned lo mifaglim, but nothing changes in terms of the halacha according to Rabbi Lazar. I mean, right? So Rabbi Lazar still holds his ground. Rabbi tried to ask a kasha on him from this brisa, but it was deflected. Rav Omer says, we also learned in our Mishnah that somebody who slaughters a korbin lechol shalil o shilya bachutz, to eat its with the intention of eating its fetus or afterbirth bachutz, right? Chutz l'mkomo lo pigul, it would not be pigul. Va'molek esatorim lechol beitzeim bachutz lo pigel, and somebody who slaughters, who does malika on a turtle dove with the intention of eating the eggs, chutz limkomo, it's not pigel. Okay. V'adatani, and then it mentioned chalev hamukdashin, the milk of female korbanos, uvetzitorim, and mentions once again the eggs of turtle doves. Ein chayav alein mishum pigul nosav v'tami, will not be chayav for pigul nosav v'tami. Hashalil v'shilya chayavim, but while it mentioned once again the eggs of the turtle doves, it does not mention once again the fetus. So while it says by the eggs of the turtle dove that there's no pigul, that if the bird is pigul, if you eat the eggs, you won't be chayiv. However, it does not say the same about the fetus, i.e., if the animal is pigul, well then there will be pigul for the fetus as well. Rather, what it means is that there is a difference of how it would become pigul. Meaning, if it's machmas hazevach, like Rabbi Lazar says, that if the animal is anyways pigul, well then the fetus will also be pigul. But if the intention is to eat the fetus chutz lizmano, well then it will not make the animal pigul, and it itself will not be pigul either. And now for the final section of today's daf, female korbin olahs. As I mentioned in the introduction, korbin olahs are male. They are male animals. Korbin fetuses are female animals. But korbin olahs need to be male animals. Korbin shlomim can be, I believe, either ones. Now, Tanan, awesome, we learn in a Mishnah on Daf Pei Daled, Ubalemumin Rabbi Kiva machshir bebalemumin, that Rabbi Kiva says that if a balmum is put on the mizbeach, you could leave it there. You don't have to take it down. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, lo yichshir Rabbi Kiva ela bedoken sheba'ayin. When Rabbi Kiva says that if a korbin has a mum, you could leave it on the mizbeach, that's talking about bedoken sheba'ayin, some kind of film on the eye. However, shem ba'ofis. The reason is because a mum should be bedoken sheba'ayin. Look, by an animal, it's considered a mum. But by a bird, it wouldn't be considered a mum. And even though by an animal it is a mum, we're talking about an animal, but we're talking about also where the animal's already on the mizbeach already. The question is, do you need to go and take it down? Saying, nah, you can leave it there because it's not a mum that's like across the board. It is a mum for an animal, sure. It's not a mum for a bird, though. It's not a mum that's like, a global mum applicable in all cases. It's not that. So, okay, you can leave the korbin there. Vusha Kodim Ekdeshan as Muman. That is, however, there's a caveat, which is that it must be that at the time that the animal was made hektish, it didn't yet have this mum. If you already had the mum at the time that you were maktish it, so then I guess you'd have to take it down. Umodu Rabbi Kiva, but olahs nekeva. Now Rabbi Kiva says though that when it comes to a female olah, now remember an olah needs to be male, which means that relative to the requirements of a korbin olah, being female is a mum. It's not a mum for a korbin chatas or korbin shlomim, but for if you want to bring a korbin olah, being female is, so to speak, a mum. So therefore, Moder Rabbi Kiva ba olahs nekeva the command the kodam muma lekdesha dami. That Rabbi Kiva says that when it comes to a female korbin olah, it would be essentially the equivalent of a pre-existing, the equivalent of a pre-existing mum, right? Just like if a mum preceded being makdish the olah, well, I mean, obviously the animal was already female at the time of being makdish it, and that would, you'd have to take it down from the mizbeach. Mosiv Reb Zera, however, asks a kasha. Hamayla meyan bachutz potter. The brisa that we had mentioned earlier says that somebody who burns these things outside of the azara is potter. So meaning, for example, if you burn the fetus of an animal outside of the azara, so then you're potter. Hameimon chayev. However, if you burn the meat of its mother, so the meat of the fetus, if you burn outside of the azara, you would be potter. Implying, though, that the meat of its mother, you would be chayev for. And the question is, what animal would you possibly be chayev for burning its meat outside of the azara? This must be talking about olahs nekeva. How come? Well, because by a shlamim, for example, it has the emurin, it has the specific things that need to be burnt on the mizbeach. The rest doesn't. So burning the meat outside of the azara, you would not be chayav for that. Same thing with a korbin chatas. Also, it has its emurin, it has the certain things that need to be burnt on the mizbeach, but the rest, the meat, doesn't have to burn on the mizbeach. A korbin olah, however, needs to be entirely burnt on the mizbeach. So what would be a korbin where you'd be chayiv for burning it bachutz? A korbin olah. And we're making this diuk that if you burn the fetus outside of the azara, you'd be potter, but its mother, you'd be chayiv for. And it must be that we're talking about a korbin olah from the fact that you're chayiv. So bishtam aksav Rabbi Akiva olahs nekeva im also lo tered. So I understand, according to Rabbi Akiva, if he says that if you have an olahs nekeva, an olah that is female, which is not supposed to be, im also lo sered, if Rabbi Akiva would say that even though it's a female olah, you can leave it on the mizbeach, right? Because we had wanted to say that according to Rabbi Akiva, a female olah would be the equivalent of a pre-existing mum, and you would take it down. However, we're arguing that from the fact that we're saying that the fetus you'd be potter for burning it outside of the azara, but the mother you'd be chayev for, and we're saying you have to be talking about an olah. It makes sense to say that you'd be chayev for burning the meat of a female olah outside of the azara if Rabbi Akiva holds olahs nekevim also lo teire, that you leave it on the mizbeach, i.e., it's shaykh to be burnt on the mizbeach, and therefore you'll be chayiv if you burn it outside of the azara. Hamani Rabbi Akiva. So therefore, this brisa is Rabbi Akiva, implying that if you burn the meat of an olahs nekeva outside of the azara, you'd be chayiv. Eliyu amartim also teire, but if you say that Rabbi Akiva says that the olahs nekeva can't be burnt on the mizbeach, well, then why would you be chayiv for burning it bachutz? Hamani, then who's the author of the brisa? Which implies that you'd be chayiv for burning the olahs nekeva bachutz. Sema ma'ile meyen bachutz pato amei emure imun chayiv. So we want to say as well, no, the way to understand the brisa is that if you burn the fetus outside of the azara, you'll be potter. But if you burn the emurin of its mother, i.e., it's not talking about a korbin olah, it's talking about the korbin shlamim or korbin chatos, which can be a female. And we're saying the emurin need to be burnt on the mizbech, and if you burn those bachutz, you'll be chayiv. But v'ha me'en katoni v'imon dumya didhu. But 1 second, it says if you burn them, the fetus, and the mother is similar to them, similar to the fetus, i.e., the meat of the mother, not just the emurin. Okay, rather say if one burns from the emurin of the fetus, outside of the azara, you would be potter, but from the emurin of its mother, so we could say that it is in fact talking about a shlamim or a chatas, where you burn the emurim, and we're saying if you burn the emurim of the mother outside of the azara, so then you would be chayev for that. Friends, that was Daf Lamed Hey of Masechta Zevachim. On Daf Lamed Hey, we learned a new Mishnah that talked about more halachos of pigul. We talked about eating things that are not normally eating, burning things that are not normally burned, having less than a shear, and then we got into all these things like the vein in the neck and the or and the rotiv and the shilyas and all sorts of stuff in that Mishnah. Pigguled fetuses. We saw the shita of Rabbi Elazar, who says that if you take, for example, a fetus, while intending to eat the fetus, chutz zmana will not create pigul, but if the animal is already pigul, then the fetus would also be pigul. We kind of then worked through that shita for a while. And at the very end, we got into the sugya of female korbin olahs. Essentially, Rabbi Kiva says that it would be, since an olah needs to be male, being female would be the equivalent of being a mum, a pre-existing mum, and if it is on the mizbech, you would have to take it down. Friends, that was Daf Lamed Hey, Daf 35, Masechta Zevachim. I hope you enjoyed. Cheers.